Today we have the privilege of interviewing one of the India's brightest mind, anthropologist Professor Annapurna Devi Pandey. Madam, welcome to our show.
Namaskar.
As a prominent figure in the OSA community and global renowned scholar in the field of anthropology, sociology, and social activism, Madam, your contribution have left a significant impact not only in academia but also in the realm of filmmaking, writing, and volunteer work, particularly in promoting Odisha and Odia causes. Professor Pandey's remarkable journey from early academic year at Ravenshaw College and Jawaharlal Nehru University to her esteemed teaching roles at institutions like University of California and a few notable research projects has been inspiring for many. Additionally, her engagement in global academic and cultural initiatives, including her contribution to women's empowerment, films, and her work with Fulbright and Commonwealth Fellowships, are testimony to her extraordinary commitment to both scholarship and social change. Welcome, Madam, to this special podcast series. Today, we are excited to have the opportunity to learn more about your experience and insights on your work in both academic and social and cultural domains. Dr. Pandey, could you share with us with initial spark your interest in sociology and anthropology and how your academic journey evolved from your time at Ravenshaw College to your postdoctoral research at Cambridge University?
Thank you so much. You are very kind. I would say that with the beautiful introduction. I must say that I'm a proud Odia. I am from Badamba, Narsinghpur. Even though I have not been born in Narsinghpur, I proudly call myself a Garjatiya. Garjatiyas, as you know, they are very independent minded, and I feel like that blood runs in me. So my father was born and raised, and I spent considerable time in the villages. The village lives with me, even though I have lived now 35 years in USA. I remember the Odia cuisine like chona sago, konti baigono, and desi alu, and corridor, lotorloi, and I just still feel the taste of this food. So when I come, I crave for it, and I feel that the Odia cuisine as part of Odia culture is so special and so unique. It makes my identity unique. I was studying psychology. I felt that it was a little boring for me because working in the lab and studying the rats and applying the Pavlov's conditioning, I decided that this is not my cup of tea. So somebody brought in the idea of JNU, one of my seniors in psychology. But I must say, in the 1970s, my parents were very, very progressive. My father was a school teacher, my mother a housewife, but I'm sure they understood the value of education. They valued also individual freedom, and they did not make any difference between a boy and a girl. So I didn't realize that. Now only I realize it. So when I had asked my father, I want to go to JNU, he said, why not? So I still remember. So I would say it was just kind of a whim, and my father and my mother agreed, and off I went. I must share a very interesting story with you that I was becoming very homesick when I went to JNU. Imagine, I am from Ranihat Gaudasahi Katak, from Ravenshaw, and there all the fashionable girls and everybody speaking convent English, and I am from secondary board high school. My English was not far from being polished, and I did not even, maybe I didn't speak English very well, and very laughable. So I was feeling very homesick. I said, why did I come to JNU? And I was sitting on the steps one day, and I had written a letter to my mother and father that, "Bo, I think you are right. I should come back home." I got a letter. My mother must have instructed my father, saying that you made the effort to go there. You must finish your education. And I have never forgotten that. So I'm making a documentary on my mother, and especially as a daughter being in the diaspora, the sense of loss of being away and being still concerned about my mother, and the kind of mother-daughter bond, and me, the sandwich generation, that being neither here nor there, and being worried about my mother here, and as well as my responsibility back at home. So the question that you asked, that how I ended up, so it was a chance. It was my parents' will, and then I made it, and I made a resolution that I must finish my education, and that was the time of after 1975, Indian feminism was on the rise, because Towards Equality report had come out, that many Bina Majumdar, Bina Das, among others, Devaki Jain, they were very active, coming to JNU very regularly. So I was very inspired by these Indian women leaders, and I wanted to make a difference for myself.
Madam, you have worked extensively on women empowerment in rural and tribal India. What are some of the most profound changes you have witnessed in this community through your research?
I grew up in an urban area in Cuttack, as I told you, but village has stayed with me. Uh, the fellow feeling, intimacy, the sense of uh, the sense of genuineness that I see in the villages, it just makes an impact on me. So I worked in the tribal areas, especially on the Niyamagiri movement against Vedanta, and I also have studied in Kandhamar, a women's movement fighting against prostitution, literally temporary marriages. Then I have moved on to other, working on weavers and other indigenous communities, and just very recently visited Tengapali women. I worked on climate heroes, and all are women. So the profound change, I must say that in the last 45 years, people are wonderful. People have not changed, but the development has been dismal. It makes me very sad. My heart goes out that the government says they have spent so much money. I don't know where that money goes, and development for whom. Because I just went to this Tengapali women, the federation, the president of Tengapali. Tengapali is, do a pali to guard the forest with a tenga. So, and that's, they're called Tengapali. 212 villages in Ranpur area, they are involved in this. They have made their beautiful mountain called Maninag absolutely green. When men failed, women have prevailed. But they don't say that we have done it. But no job for the children, and unemployment, poverty, the houses are bare. So, and I'm just thinking that what has gone wrong? So I feel that we, being academicians, educationists, and and responsible citizens of the country, we must ensure that people must have their sense of dignity. Dignity must not be stolen from people. So, in order to ensure that, we must share, we must really make them our equal partners, and give them the credit for what they are doing, and share our resources to make sure to stand with us. Huge inequality, huge kind of discrepancy. So, in the last 50 years, I wish I could tell you that a lot has changed, but it's kind of two Indias.
What do you think is the future of Odia's representation on global stage, and how can academic and cultural exchange contribute to this?
Excellent question. I bring Odisha to my classroom, to my research, and to all my talks, my discourse, academic discourse. Odias are doing extremely well in the diaspora. There are about 100,000 Odias and they are mostly all technology based. And also there are few, now their number is increasing in academics and sciences and engineering, computer science. So um, the strength lies in the number. So they're becoming much more visible. But we, since as you mentioned, that I have been involved with Odisha Society of the Americas, the oldest diasporic organization outside Odisha. Since 1969, the organization has been thriving, promoting Odia identity in the diaspora. We have tried our level best to work with the Odisha government to do cultural exchange, to do academic exchange. So we should keep that initiative going. And if the universities and the Odisha government, they take the interest, we really can take it to a different level. We can bring our students here. I offered a course just a couple of years ago with Ramadevi University, that having students from Ramadevi and my students doing a seminar
Excellent.
together. So they would be joining on Zoom. So even that sort of exposure brings a lot of change. That for both, I'm not saying only for the Odisha students in America, they just live in the air, in the dream world. They have no idea about the life, the society, the worldview. Unless one has grounded experience, one would not know. So we should really promote more and more exchanges.
Madam, my last questions to you. Looking back to your illustrious career, what advice would you give to young scholars and activists who wish to follow your footsteps?
Thank you so much again for this very profound question. I would say never ever get dissuaded in whatever you are doing. I come from a very humble background. My father was a school teacher. People ask me, oh, this minister, that minister, this kind of. I said, no, no, no. My father, I do not, I don't want to make false association. So, and I'm very proud of my heritage. So I would say that nothing should dissuade us from following our dream. Yes, there are lots of challenges, lots of constraints, and lots of obstacles. And especially being a girl, as you know, in Odisha, still I realize that girls are doing extremely well in education. See that your political science, journalism students, you have a majority of girls, but when it comes to their aspiration, always marriage becomes the ultimate goal. So I realize that even a message, humble suggestion to our parents, that if our daughter wants to study, let her study. Let her follow her goal. It's happening, things are changing, but we want to see more of it. So, in beautifully, the CEO of Facebook, now Meta, she says, Sheryl Sandberg says that women have come on par with men when it comes to higher education. But when it comes to employment, and especially the corporate responsibility, and especially when it comes to the Fortune 500 companies joining the executive jobs, women are still, there is a gap. Women are still behind. Why? Not because they are any lesser, because women have so many responsibilities of their parents, responsibilities of their kins. When I was working in the villages in Paralakemundi for my skill training work, so I asked a young woman, why don't you go and work in Bangalore? He said, I have 2 young brothers. I have to make sure that they get educated. She collects cotton.
They sacrifice their life for
Scoppa. She says, no, if I go, my mother is not well. My brothers are going to college, sacrificing her life for
dreams.
her. And that does not happen more in the Western world, because that's this whole responsibility of kin responsibility and the filial responsibility or the filial obligation is so strong among us that in the Indian culture. So I would say that sacrifice is necessary, but at the same time, that if a woman is on her own, she lifts up the whole family.